I'm so excited to talk to you because I know that we have communicated for a few years now, but I think that in the last year or so, we've been like talking more on and off as well and been more supporting each other. I've been looking at like some of your posts and what you stand for and everything, and it's incredible. You've been posting since 2018.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So
it's true.
I wonder, I wonder why I haven't really connected with you in the past. So what is this, like, one of my questions is, what is the story behind why you started posting? Welcome to Behind the Allergy, a podcast all about allergic conditions, hearing open and honest insights from the people who are behind them, from allergy reactors to free-from brands to allergists. This episode is with Zoe, founder of Invisibly Allergic. Soon to be food allergy author, she is an allergy advocate using her experiences to propose food allergy policy. She is a disability advocate and blogger for Invisibly Allergic, empowering the food allergy community. Her aim is to spread food allergy awareness far and wide by prioritizing transparent food labeling laws in the US, universal healthcare, and the dismantling of price grouping in big pharma. I hope you enjoy the episode and go away learning more about her story behind the allergy. Hi Zoe, and welcome to Behind the Allergy.
Hey, Lindy, thank you for having me.
What is the story behind why you started posting?
Yeah. You're like one of the only people who I feel like has ever asked this and noticed this. But yeah, I started my blog in 2017 and I started posting in 2018 on Instagram. And honestly, when I started my blog and my website, it was very much like, I mean, you know how Instagram and TikTok and everything has just taken off more recently. But back then it was just kind of having a blog and a website was like the way to go. And I was kind of like writing out into the abyss, like, is anyone else out there who is like me at a global level? Because I feel very alone in my experience. And I was coming off the cusp of, I went into my first like near-death anaphylactic experience in 2013. And I wanted to blog about it then, but I really didn't even know like exactly what to say. I felt like super kind of traumatized by it. I didn't really want to think about it for a long time. And I was very overwhelmed by what to eat, how to eat, what was I even reacting to? Because I was eating things that didn't say that they contained peanuts, but I was having reactions. And so I feel like from 2013 to like 2017, I was just navigating that space alone. And I started blogging out of isolation and sadness, to be honest. I was very much like, what's going on with me? And I never thought of myself as like a content creator or, being like, I honestly don't really like making posts on social. Like, I'm starting to like it more, but it's been like a growth trajectory of like me liking to do it more often, which is probably why we connected. Because when I first started making posts, I was like, I don't even know how to do this. Like, I don't know what people want to know. I don't know what to say. So yeah, I've been doing it for a long time, but it's been an evolution.
I think, are we similar in ages?
Yeah, I think so. I saw you just turned 32. I'm 34.
Okay, yeah. So we basically have had allergies for similar amounts of time. So we've seen, where things have come from, things like that. So I think there is an element in the allergy community online that we are the I said this in another podcast, we're the elders of Instagram, basically, and that we saw it be a small community from the very beginning, and now it's being something where I can't keep up. Like, I can't keep up with how many people are sharing, which is so amazing, because now I feel like nobody feels alone. Well, they might, but like, as in there's so much more of us that it's hard to feel alone in this community now. But it's changed so much, and I think that I feel like having a healthy relationship with social media is something where that's what keeps you going, because, being able to take a step back and not have it like overwhelm your life, especially when for you talk about advocacy a lot. And, advocacy can be quite hard when it comes to like behind the scenes, because you can be advocating, but sometimes when you're met with, I don't know, misunderstanding or miscommunication or ignorance, basically, it can be quite frustrating because you think that what you're doing is you're doing something good and you're doing something powerful. But then when you're met with, a barrier, it can feel so frustrating. And so how do you manage that when you come up against things where people just don't actually want to know?
Yeah, people don't care, maybe even.
Yeah.
It's actually been kind of a lifelong struggle for me. It's interesting because I am very extroverted. Growing up, like I was a big animal lover. I got into like cruelty-free products when I was like 11. And so I was very much just kind of like, I've always had this fire in me about like social issues and just wanting to help and kind of like be a part of like a bigger change. And it doesn't have to be me that's doing it, but I want to be like a part of it. And I kind of feel that way with like my social media presence with Invisibly Allergic, because if I see someone else making content that I'm like blown away by, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm just going to share this. I'm going to comment on it. They did the work. Like, good for them. I don't need to say anything about this because they've got it covered to a T. They're doing excellent. Like, one less thing for me to necessarily post about in a way because they've kind of like done it. So I try to share it out and just amplify instead of like me having to be the place where everyone comes to. Like, I don't put pressure on myself where I need to be like that source. But at the same time, if I find a resource that I find really helpful and that's like changed my life, I put it on my blog, I put it on my social media. But it is heavy. And so I'm on a board. It's like an associate board in Louisville where I live in Kentucky for homelessness. And I worked with the Kentucky Humane Society for a long time. And so Invisibly Allergic isn't like my first go at advocacy, but it's the first time where I felt like I have this knowledge built in. And so it feels really different from any of the past advocacy work that I've done. And so I think I have more energy in that sense. Like when it comes to the animal and cruelty, like I have a rescue beagle. I'm so passionate about, all these different issues that I witness with my own eyes in my life. And I want to just make the planet have people live joyfully and better. That's like my end goal. But when it comes to food allergies, I'm like, the knowledge just comes out of me and I've never experienced anything like that. And I assume I, may not ever again in the same way. And so that's what keeps me going. And it's really just fun for me, honestly, to advocate in a way where like I do feel like I can always like rebuttal or like I have an example really easily because it's just my life. So, but it's depressing. I've definitely, I have to watch my self-care and I work with my therapist on like self-compassion and things like that just to balance it because it can be really it's sad when you see someone being like, well, I don't care. I'm going to eat nuts anyway. And if they die from it, it's just very cold. And I think people don't realize the weight a lot of the time of what they're saying. I think there's like a lack of awareness and misconceptions that lead to that. And so, yeah, it is a hard balance. And I'm not always on Instagram. I take days away and stuff to help myself in that sense.
That just comes from doing it for years where you're like, you get to see what's good for you, what's best for you. You touched on your name and I want to know a little bit more about it because I love the name Invisibly Allergic. So yeah, can you tell me more about that name and like where it came from?
Yeah. It was just like, honestly, I lucked into it. I was trying to figure out a way of describing, because I'm airborne to peanut and I'm very reactive to trace amounts. So like cross contact, which is how I kind of started this journey, was I was eating foods that didn't say that they had peanuts in them. I realized that the labeling laws in the US allowed for and didn't require any type of transparency around cross contact. If something's on shared equipment with peanuts, that's where I was having these reactions from. And I was so upset because I felt like I have no control over my food allergy. I don't understand what I'm reacting to. Like, apparently I'm allergic to more than just peanuts, but I can't figure it out. And then it was like, no, it's all peanut. It's just all contaminated. And so that's what led me to the Invisibly, was just like, I can't see in this piece of chocolate if there's any contamination, but I eat it and I have an allergic reaction. And so I'd wanted to blog for, since my 2013 anaphylactic reaction. And I would like to write. And so my husband finally was like, you should just start writing and just see what happens with it. And so I went on to, WordPress and was seeing what names were available. And Invisibly Allergic was the first one I tried, and it was available. And I was like, all right, we're going with that. But now I get so many compliments on it. And it's so funny because I tend to overanalyze things like a name of a brand. But in 2017, I was literally like, maybe 3 people will look at my website, like, if even. Like, I have no idea how websites work. I don't know, like, if anyone's gonna find this. So I get so many compliments on Invisibly Allergic, and it resonates with me so much. And I'm like so thankful that I made this decision back when I was just being totally like, la di da, oh, that sounds good, accept.
I think as well, like, it is invisible. Like, mostly, apart from if we have skin issues, it is invisible. And that's what is also so hard, is most people don't really realize how mentally draining it can be because you don't really see it unless you see it. If we have an anaphylactic reaction, people don't really see the consequences of it, and they don't really know what you're dealing with. Yeah, I always thought, like, if somebody could see me having an allergic reaction, maybe they can understand it better. But I don't ever want that to be the case, like, I don't want to ever wish that on myself. So yeah, it's hard to have that,
like, gymnastics that go along with it. Because it's like, Invisibly Allergic, I didn't realize that, like, invisible disabilities were something that I was a part of for a long time. And then it was like, oh, like, I identify as having a food allergy disability because it impacts me in all aspects of my life, 24 hours a day, never a break from it. And the more disability writing and books and content that I was taking in, I was like, this all resonates. This is totally my experience. And so I do call it like an invisible disability or an invisible disease, however you want to word it. But most of it is invisible unless I'm having a reaction, which the majority of what's going on in my life is trying to prevent myself from having that reaction. And so that's where my energy is going. And so it's such an invisible experience because I'm constantly wiping things down. I'm constantly thinking like 4 steps ahead, thinking, how close am I to a hospital if something were to happen? All of these things go into it. It's all just in my mind. It's all invisible. So yeah, it is interesting to think about like how the food allergy experience, at least in my experience with it, is mostly just avoidance. So that when it comes down to it, it's like, that's the management,
Yeah, and I think that also plays into your mental health too, because I sometimes don't realize why I have quite like a general anxiety on life, and especially as I get older. But I just thought everyone felt this way. But I think when you're up here with your anxiety, then any other stressors just become worse. But most people's anxiety levels are down here. And I think that as people who manage food allergies, we are constantly on a high level of awareness and anxiety because we are always looking for triggers, always looking on the outside of what's going to happen. And so I think the mental health aspect plays a part. And, you talking about your therapist and like coping mechanisms. And I think that is so important for anyone who's is managing anything basically, but also like it's really important to have like compassion and self-compassion when you are advocating for things and when you are making people more aware, because it takes a thick skin to come up to people and to try and make people understand. Like it's hard because you have to take the brunt of their comments, whereas if you just live your life and you don't have to worry about advocacy, you don't realize how insensitive people can be. And so
Yeah.
that takes a toll on you, because then you are going into the world thinking that people are not going to understand you. And that's hard. It's hard for any human being to think that they're not understood. So, I think it's important to remember that you need self-compassion as well, because it's a hard world out there, especially with people, like, especially managing food allergies. So
Absolutely, I agree. I know just you saying that, like I have memories coming into my mind. It's traumatic,
yeah.
experiences where I've had conversations one-on-one with people where they're like, I don't understand and I'm going to eat this anyway. And it's like, please don't. Like,
Yeah.
here is my like 30-second spiel that I've just, to try to ask you to do these things for this reason. And it's like you're basically asking someone to care about you who's a stranger. And it's a weird situation to be in.
Yeah.
But I know that a lot of other people do have similar experiences. I feel like food allergy is one that's not as well understood. But I also feel like it's not, like, I see food allergies in a bigger area of like disability and just disease and chronic illness and all of that. Like, I know other people are going through it, even if they don't have a food allergy. They're probably, going through lack of accommodations for a number of other things.
If you can connect to somebody on a personal level and about, like, well, what about if it was you? Or what about, like, you're managing this. Imagine if somebody said, no, we're not going to cater for you. Like, how would that make you feel? But when it's, sometimes it can be fight or flight. Like, it can be like, actually, I just need to get out of this situation because it's not going anywhere. And I think it's, it's hard. You mentioned you have airborne allergies. I think there's a lot on my Instagram right now of people and allergists saying that it's not a real thing, or it's not a severe thing. How does that show up for you? And then how does that affect you when people are saying that it's not really that severe? It must be such a hard thing to constantly be worrying about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the airborne is so tricky. I'm glad that you asked, because it's been a struggle for me, like a personal challenge where I'm like, am I airborne or am I not? And so the earliest memories I have of myself, well, I guess the earliest I actually have, if I'm really thinking about it, when I was like in pre-K, like 5 years old age range, I was sitting at a table with someone with a peanut butter sandwich, and I was like, I smell food. I smell peanuts. Like, get me out of here. And I didn't have any reaction, but I've always been really, really sensitive to the smell. And so going through like K through 12 schools here in the US, when I was in high school, I would start to notice that I was having reactions when friends of mine would eat, salted peanuts next to me or things like that. So it kind of was a gradual where I was like, am I having, I'd go out into the hallway and I would assess, am I having a reaction or am I not? And usually I'd be able to be like, I'm not, I'm okay. I'm going to go back in there. I'm just going to make sure I don't touch any of the surfaces. And then my first true like airborne experience that I had was in high school. It was my senior year. So I was like, I don't know, 17, 18 on an airplane. And I started having hives. My lip was swelling, and it was when they were passing out the peanuts on the plane. And so until that point, I really was like aware of it. I had anxiety around, am I having a reaction? Am I not? But I knew I was having a reaction in that moment, and I hadn't eaten anything. And so that was the first time where I was like, this is interesting. I asked an allergist. They said, no, doesn't happen. So I was like, it must have been in my head. Okay. And so then through college, I started having more and more reactions that had nothing to do with me eating. I hadn't touched my face. And so I basically had this experience. I talk about it on my blog. But I had this like experience where I walked into a gallery that I was interning in, and it was a completely empty room. It was like a warehouse kind of style art gallery. And I walked in, and immediately I was like, something feels weird. I'm starting to feel kind of dizzy. I'm feeling disoriented, but I'm looking around. There's no one in here. There's literally all the tables are like pressed up against the wall. There's nothing going on. So I'm like, okay, this is like totally weird. It's in my head. So then I'm like walking through the space. I'm like, I'm having an allergic reaction. My lips are swelling. I'm starting to get hives on my chest. So I didn't even touch anything to get into the building because the doors were propped open. So I just walked right back out. And I texted my friend who had been in the space earlier that day. And I was like, hey, Joanna, like I'm sure it's all in my head. I know you were here like a couple hours ago. Was anyone eating anything with peanuts while this was going on? And instead of her writing me back, which is what I was expected, either her being like, oh yeah, I don't know what you're talking about, or not responding back, I get this text back from her in all caps, like, Zoe, get out of there. There were so many peanuts in that space. And I was like, what? I'm like, I can't believe this. I had no idea that anything like that had happened. She was like, there were Snickers bars on every table, like mountains of them, hundreds of people in there. So I was like, okay, I'm having an allergic reaction. I took Benadryl. I had my epinephrine near me. I called my mom. I'm like, I'm having an airborne reaction. I don't know like how bad it's going to get. And I've always been able to control them with Benadryl or something like that. I've never had to use my epinephrine. But honestly, like when I see the symptoms of what I've had, I probably should have used my epinephrine in previous times. But now I'm so cautious. I wear a mask a lot of the time. So I really haven't had like an airborne experience because I kind of curate my life in a way where like I go to people's homes and they don't use peanuts well, days before I get there, and people don't eat them in their cars who are my friends and things like that. So yeah, it's been a journey where I didn't believe, and I felt like I was gaslighting myself because all the allergists I talked to, everything I read online, it's like, it's not possible, it's not possible. And then I kept having these reactions, didn't know why, had that art gallery experience. And I was like, this is it. I'm trusting myself from now on. This really happened to me. And from that point on, I've called myself airborne allergic. And I've only found an allergist in Louisville who, when I talked to him about it just this past year, he was like, yeah, I have many, patients who are airborne reactive, and he really validated my experience. And he said, I keep up to date on studies. It's something that is being proven. And if you're having the experience, guess who they're studying to find out if it's real or not? They're studying people like you. And so I'm ahead of it. I feel like now it's becoming more talked about, where it's like, it is possible if someone's steaming something, things go airborne.
I have this theme. I've realized now, like, I'm never usually around my allergens. I had an allergy-free house. Like, my mom never had anything that I was allergic to in the house, which I was very lucky, but it was just me and her. But I'm realizing that steamed lentils smells like peanut butter to me. Like, anything I'm allergic to always smells like peanut butter, like legumes. I guess it smells like legumes. But in my head,
I resonate with that.
Yeah, I have asthma attacks if I'm around it. And I don't think it is severe enough for me to use my EpiPen, but it's severe enough that I feel like my chest is closing. Like, I have to lie down and I have to take deep breaths and I have to open all the windows and things like that. And so I think we need to be a lot more careful when we just do blanket statements that it's just not real.
Yeah, exactly. I know it's been I felt so like, it's been a journey because I'm not someone who's very like bold with my, like, I am an extrovert, but I'm also very like passive in a lot of ways. I'm very like empathetic. And so for me to come out and say like I'm airborne allergic is a really big deal for me. Because most people say that's not a thing. And so it even makes me emotional thinking about it, because it's like, I've told myself for so many years that it was not true, and it is true. And so I'm just like, well, that's the experience I'm having. And where can we go from here? Because this is my reality, is that I'm walking into a space not knowing that there's any peanuts there, and I'm having a reaction. I'm not anxious.
I think it's important as well to like trust yourself too, and to be able to say like, I know what I'm having. And that is the biggest thing that I feel like allergies have taught me, is trust my gut instinct, because it's usually always right. And even if it's not, what does that matter? If I took myself out of that situation and it's not correct, or I was being too fussy or whatever, at least I was safe, right? You don't want to be putting yourself, oh, I should stay here, I'm being silly, and then have a reaction. So I think that's important. You do a lot of advocacy, but what we've been talking about is the catharsis. I don't know if that's the actual word, but feeling cathartic, but with your writing. So you write certain things, you write poetry. Can I say that? Is that okay? Yeah, okay. That you write poetry about advocacy and about invisible illnesses and things like that. And talk to me about how that helps you manage your conditions.
Yeah, I think it really is like a mental health thing. Like I've always been very artistic, and I collaged a lot growing up. I always have painted. I paint pet portraits for family and friends and stuff. And so I've always been very like creative. And I think in the past like 5 to 6 years, I've really kind of like gone on this different creative journey where I'm turning to writing. And so I've been getting into poetry. I studied creative writing a little bit in college, so I'm like getting back into that, like looking at my old textbooks and things. But I feel like it just is a way for me to get things out of my mind and onto not paper, because I'm doing it on my computer. But which I really enjoy. Like I love the tools that are available to me now, like powerthesaurus.com is a game changer. But yeah, it's really just cathartic. Like you said, it's getting these feelings out, and whether I share it or not doesn't matter to me. I will say I just finished writing my first book. And so I have the first full draft of it, and I'm taking 2 weeks off, and then I'm going to start editing it and pitching it. But it's a creative nonfiction, basically memoir of essays. And it's all about just raising awareness, kind of trying to put people in my shoes, put people in food allergy shoes, so that they can have empathy and just create like more general awareness of food allergies. So I've wanted to do an art project, and it's just never come to fruition because I didn't feel that passion. And so I'm feeling with writing, and that's the direction I'm going in.
That sounds amazing. I can't wait to read that. Like, where do you think we need more awareness in life when it comes to allergies?
Ooh, I love that. I do find that, I'm posting on Invisibly Allergic Instagram. Most of my followers have food allergies. So like sometimes it feels like I love when I find new people, and I have a lot of friends and family and stuff that follow me on there. But I try to spread awareness outside of that bubble that can kind of form and happen just because, people resonate and they want to follow, but I'm speaking to the choir. So I work in a place that's peanut free. I'm a big advocate for people asking for their needs to get met, and it doesn't come naturally to me, like I said, but that's my requirement now if I go into an in-person office. And so just having my workplace be peanut free, it's like 50 people who are not exposed to food allergies, and now they know so much more than they ever wanted to know, because if they have questions about takeout coming into the building or bringing their dog in and what their dog needs to eat before, like we're having all these conversations. So I think just whatever your circle is, expanding out a little bit and just having a face, I think is really important in a lot of ways to the experience, because people see me at my workplace and they're like, oh, it's just Zoe, she is our research and assets coordinator or whatever. But they actually know a lot of personal information about me. And they have, they're keeping me safe. And so just thinking of community support, ways that you might, be able to educate others around you who know you, but maybe don't know that side of you, and kind of getting that awareness going would be my biggest recommendation. Because in person, it feels like online is great. In person is also really powerful.
Can you share some of the advocacy work that you have done in the past that you are proud of?
Yeah, absolutely. So 2 years ago is when I found out about an event that happens in the U.S. called Courage at Congress. And it's run by the nonprofit FAIR, Food Allergy Research and Education. And they do this event where it helps educate people on government and bureaucratic process that, maybe not everyone knows like me. And so it's just people impacted by food allergies that can come to this event. And they do a lot of like comping and financial like assistance, which I really appreciate to get people there. And then they essentially train you in a sense to be able to talk to your state and house reps and lobby efficiently and effectively. And that's been something I've been so proud of. I like I said, I'm an extrovert, but I also like have a struggle, I think, maybe being as a woman, especially like my age. There's like a little bit of a barrier for me sometimes to like get myself out of my comfort zone and like talk about something really passionately. And that organization and event in particular, I've done it for 2 years now, and I plan to just continue doing it because it's such a rewarding experience. And then personally, since I have that insight from Courage at Congress and the bills that we're working to get passed by state or federal law, I know what there's a lack of. And so I can see the holes that exist. And so I've started my own food allergy email group in the US, and it includes a variety of people. I've been trying to get more food allergy lawyers and people who have experience with bill writing. But I'm really proud of the group that I've put together. There's about 70 of us. And we are working to write policy and bills that aren't in action right now or in progress. So getting like alcoholic beverages, for example, labeled, or getting gluten labeled as like a top allergen, things like that. So that's in a nutshell. I don't know if I want to say that, but that's that's what I'm most proud of. And then my book, honestly, I'm really hoping that it can reach people and help people who are going through the experience. It's kind of written for people who, to educate those who are in the general public and may not have any idea about food allergies and the severity, but then also I'm hoping it hits and resonates with people who might feel isolated.
Wow. I mean, that's amazing. Like, I think we definitely have things like that here, but not as like a massive, I don't know, community, like offline. There's like, we have research charities and things like that, which are doing incredible work, but it's harder to get involved, and so I find it hard to get involved in those things. So I think what you're doing is incredible. So yeah, I'm excited for people to know and to follow you in the work that you're doing. Does advocacy impact you positively or negatively, but has it impacted your like day-to-day life?
Yeah, it has. I definitely feel like sometimes I have a bit of a dark cloud over me. Like I tend to, like, I feel things very strongly. I feel a lot of positivity. I also feel a lot of like negativity or like depressing. I just look around me and I'm like, oh gosh, like I know I can't fix all of this stuff, but how did this get that way? I think what we talked about earlier with like balance has definitely been key. But yeah, the advocacy work can negatively impact, but also positively impact. I think it just depends. Like with friends and family and my workplace and people who already know me, I think it feels positive. With people where there's more barriers and I'm having to do more of that, like here's like a breakdown of like the very basics of why this is important, how many people are affected. I can get a lot from it if they're open to it, and then it can get pretty quickly depressing. I guess I keep saying that word, but if someone isn't open to it, it does take a toll. So yeah, it's something that I have chosen to do. I always know it's an option that I don't have to advocate. If I want to just turn this off and live, that's fine. But I keep choosing to do it. If there's a point where it gets so negative and I feel like this is not serving me and not healthy to me, then I can always turn that off. So that's kind of where I come at it from. But for right now, I've really been enjoying it. And I do try to like advocate from a mindset of like broad, like factual statistics, like here's the number of people in the US with this impacted. Here's the labeling laws that we have and the reason why that's problematic. Here's the cost of epinephrine. So to me, it is helpful to think of it in that perspective because I feel like I have more of like a fighting chance to like these are facts.
Yeah.
People can't argue with them as much as like, this is my experience kind of a thing.
I think you're doing a terrific job, and it looks like you're being healthy with it. So I think that's really important. Thank you so much for being open and talking to us more about what you deal with behind your allergy, because I think that's what pushes you to keep wanting change, and then that helps all of us listening and or watching, because the work you're doing is going to impact us. So I think thank you for your time, but also thank you for doing what you're doing behind your allergy.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited by this platform, and I really appreciate you doing this international and being able to feature me from the U.S. because I know it is different perspectives globally. So I really appreciate you, Lindy.
Thank you. I always like to end it with, how is your mental health at the minute?
It's good. Yeah, it's been a roller coaster lately. I have psoriatic arthritis. My autoimmune has kind of taken over my allergy stuff lately, but things have been really, really good for me. I'm taking the time to myself, and that's the reason why it is that way.
Great. Thank you. Oh, that was so nice. I actually think that we have so much in common that I had no idea. Yeah. You're anaphylactic